Hello, beautiful people. I'm Marie Fajardo, and this is my Advocacy Playbook podcast, dedicated to empowering parents and professional advocates in the special education journey. Today, we're diving into a crucial topic that often comes up during the IEP process: your right to an independent educational evaluation, or the acronym IEE. So, what is exactly an IEE? Simply put, it's an evaluation of your child conducted by a qualified, independent professional who is not employed by the public agency responsible for your child's education. Now, I have my own opinions about the definition of independent, and we can get into that later. But think of this as a second opinion at public expense if you disagree with your school's evaluation. This right is explicitly granted to parents under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, ensuring that your child's needs are thoroughly and fairly assessed. Now, going back to it's an explicit right, there are some caveats, and we'll get into that. When you request an IEE, the primary trigger for requesting an IEE is disagreement with the evaluation conducted or obtained by the school district. When I say conducted, sometimes the school district's actual employees conduct the evaluations versus sometimes school districts contract out and obtain it from a different provider or assessor not otherwise formally employed by the district. This means if the school has evaluated your child and you believe their assessment is inaccurate, incomplete, or doesn't fully capture your child's needs, you can request an IEE. It's important to remember that you're entitled to one IEE at public expense each time the school conducts an evaluation with which you do not agree. So here's how to request an IEE. So you've reviewed the school district's evaluation and you disagree. What's next? This is what you do step by step. Submit a written request. While it's not legally required to submit a written request, it's highly recommended to submit your request in writing to the school district stating your disagreement with their evaluation and your request for the IEE at public expense. Include the date and specific reasons for your disagreement. Keep a copy for your records. Back in the day, before email was a big thing, we physically would bring the letters to the school district office, have them date stamp the copy and make a copy and give us a copy date stamped. Some people still prefer that method. I prefer, the email method. You can do both, but that is the most cost-effective way to do that. And when you email it to the director of special education or whoever's in charge of special education. Email it to a couple of people so they can't say they didn't receive the request. Okay. Now, once you submit your request in writing, the district has two options. Option one is to fund the IEE, and that means they agree to pay for the IEE. Now, or two, to file for due process. Okay. Now, if they fund the IEE, let's say they agree, they are required to provide you with a list of qualified evaluators and information about the criteria that they're using in order to decide what is the qualified provider in terms of their purposes. Okay. And I say that because, and not everybody's going to agree with me, but in my experience, school districts use this criteria process to restrict a parent's choice of assessors. That is a big thing going on right now. And so the criteria I mean is location, right? They don't want you utilizing an assessor out of state if there are qualified assessors in your state. They don't want you to use an assessor that's $10,000 if the same qualified assessor is available for $5,000. Part of the problem that we're having here in California is that there are a lot of assessors, but I have specific requirements for assessors that I would like to use for my clients in particular. Uh, and so I have procedures that I follow, questions that I ask, because the point of an IEE is to, in terms of disagreeing with the district, equal firepower. You want someone who can equally stand up and defend their assessment data to a district, just as a district is supposed to be able to equally stand up and defend their assessment data. So going back, they agree to pay for it. They have criteria: maximum cost, qualifications. So for instance, if it's a psychoeducational evaluator, then they have to be a school psychologist. In California, we have a school psych credential. In states like New York, they have psychologists. They don't have a school psychology. And so there's a lot of things in California that's a lot different that I don't necessarily agree with. And sometimes I feel like it's extra barriers to assessments. But, and again, people may not agree with me. You don't have to agree. These are just my opinions in my practice over the last 15 years. So, that being said, then we talk about costs. We also have a huge cost issue. There was some OAH case in Long Beach a few years ago, in which I believe it was Long Beach. The school district had allegedly exhausted all of their uh, assessors in the area and created this vast list and said that, I don't know, it was some low amount of 5,500 was the cost of a comprehensive psychoeducational evaluation. And don't quote me on that price, but I believe that was about it. And I think it was like 2-3 years ago. Well, excuse me, that was the price for a comprehensive IEE by a truly independent assessor 6-7 years ago. So I don't know how they're coming up with this, when prices are rising, inflation is going up, the cost of eggs is like $10 or, I mean, an insane amount. And I'm just throwing numbers out there, right? But we all know that everything's going up, not going down. Everybody's getting pay raises, right? My question is, are school district employees getting pay cuts, or are they asking for raises? And so why are we expecting truly independent assessors who have a higher cost of operations to take a pay cut just because independent assessors, according to the districts, should be charging less? Anyway, it's this whole big thing, and we don't get into that, and we'll have a different show. Now, if they file for due process, which, this has happened, and I've worked with the wonderful and talented Nicole Hodge Amy, and we've had this case where district was filed, for due process, and, knock on wood, we've won those cases. The school district gets to file for due process to defend their assessment if they believe that their evaluation was appropriate. And at the hearing, they have to demonstrate that their evaluation was appropriate. And if the hearing officer finds that their evaluation was appropriate, you then have the right, you don't have the right to obtain an IE at district expense. You can get an IE, but you would have to pay for it. So it's crucial to understand these options and timelines, because there are not necessarily timelines, but there are timelines with regard to filing of a due process, but not necessarily timelines with regard to IEs. And I mean, it's a little bit complicated because when you request an IEE, the law says the district must respond without unnecessary delay, right? And so that in itself is a whole nother discussion. What is unnecessary delay? Well, I mean, the short answer is what is reasonable. This is where your procedural safeguards come into play. So when a school district agrees to fund an IE, they have certain responsibilities. So again, they must respond to your request for an IE without unnecessary delay. They should provide you with information about where to obtain an IE, including a list of qualified evaluators. Most of the time, these lists are not exhaustive. They must tell you the criteria for the evaluators. The school district may establish reasonable criteria for the qualifications of the independent evaluators, the cost of IE, However, this criteria must be the same criteria that the public agency uses when it initiates an evaluation. So they can't be more restrictive than what they are imposing upon their own assessors. For instance, one of the big things here in California right now is that they are imposing insurance requirements, specifically sexual abuse and molestation um, requirements for insurance for providers. Now, the issue, or SAMS insurance, the issue with that is that they don't require that of their own assessors. Now, most of the time, most assessors that work for the districts that are assessing students on behalf of the district don't even know if the district is maintaining that insurance for them. So again, there's lots of issues here. And then, of course, the district must consider the IEE results at the IEP meeting and any decision made with respect to the provision of FAPE. The district must consider the IEE. Now, a common question is, can the school require me to use a specific evaluator? This has happened a lot to clients that I've met who were not, otherwise represented by an advocate who knew, or an attorney who knew. Sometimes school districts will send parents to the California Department of Education's Diagnostic Center, which is a free assessment center run by the state, and call that an IEE. Well, they're not really independent, but they are. That's kind of that blurry gray area. And I don't know if other states have something similar, but no, they cannot. Okay. You have the right to choose your assessor as long as it meets with the district's criteria. And here in California, we also have what we call SELPAs, or special education local plan areas. And so a lot of times districts will say, oh, the SELPA says we have to do this. Here in California, SELPA issues guidelines pertaining and governing parents' access to IEEs. And I ask all the SELPA directors. They're like, these are just guidelines. And so districts can, but do not have to, adhere to them. So so everybody, you got the right finger pointing to the left finger, pointing at each other. Well, they said we have to do this, and they're saying we don't have to do this. And so sometimes these questions don't get answered. So I have a whole strategy with that I teach my clients, that I teach the advocates that I mentor, that I get into with my training videos and things like that. But again, you can choose any qualified evaluator as long as they meet the school's criteria. And if you get into a fight with that, that's something that, as an advocate, my consulting agency can help you with, and things like that. So anyway, going back to the IEE. What are the benefits of the IEE? Why go through the process of requesting IEE? Well, there are several significant benefits. First of all, there's the objective perspective, right? An independent evaluator can offer a fresh, unbiased perspective on your child's strengths and challenges. This is why it's important to find someone truly independent. It can be hard to find someone truly independent that actually understands what a legally defensible evaluation should entail. It's amazing how many evaluators that assess independently or for school districts do not know how to present a legally defensible report. How many assessors that do not know how to analyze data. I think that's one of the things that's getting lost, which is why I'm very picky about my choice in evaluators. I have evaluators that I've worked with through the years that I will say, these are the ones that I recommend. I give parents a choice. I give them my opinion if they choose someone that I've never worked with, the pros and cons, and we discuss that. And that's something that you need to discuss. It's a very personal choice. But at the end of the day, an IEE may have to be presented in front of a judge, and it's going to be scrutinized, not just by a judge or administrative, law judge, but the district's lawyer, if there is a disagreement. And so you really want a strong report from someone who can defend their evaluation. The other benefit is having a comprehensive understanding. The IE might identify areas of need or provide different insights that the school's evaluation missed. So independent evaluators tend to put more hours into their evaluations. They tend to do more comprehensive assessment, more comprehensive interviews, more comprehensive evaluation, observation, all of the above. They have more time. They don't have the caseloads that a lot of the school district employees do, unfortunately. And so they also have the additional training, right? That here in California, unfortunately, school psychs, for the most part, are only required to have a credential. And I believe it's like a master's degree. I created a chart, right, to understand the different qualifications of here in California, a school psychologist credential versus a licensed educational psychologist in California versus a licensed psychologist and then a neuropsychologist. And so that is another, video that we're going to, a live video, I think that we're going to have. So I think that's important information for families to have, especially here in California, because we have so many requirements. But anyway, and then the other benefit of an IEE is a stronger IEP development. The findings from an IEE can lead to more appropriate and individualized programming, that truly addresses your child's unique needs, measurable goals, present levels of performance drive goals drive services drive placement. And so it is so important to have a comprehensive assessment, because a defective evaluation at the beginning of the IEP process leads to a defective IEP. And so I am so adamant about why assessments are important, because that really drives everything else. Empowerment, knowing your rights and exercising them empowers you as a parent to advocate for your child, right? This is just one piece. There are so many moving parts to the IEP process. This is such a small piece, but such an important one. So here are some important considerations for the IE process, okay? Some points to keep in mind. Timelines. Be aware of the timelines involved. While the school has a specific time to respond, due process hearings can take time, right? So depending on the individual needs, and that's where you work with a skilled advocate or a skilled attorney in determining, the needs of your case, the purpose of the IEE, and specific timelines. Communication. Again, maintain clear and written communication with the school district throughout the process. Sometimes, again, depending on your needs of your case, your advocate and your attorney will work with you to determine, what that communication with the district's going to look like. Documentation. Keep meticulous records of all correspondence, evaluations, meetings. I always say, keep things in writing. I prefer to keep things in writing. If the school district calls, let it go to voicemail. Keep that voicemail. Because if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Seek support. Okay. Don't hesitate to seek support from a skilled advocate. There are parent advocacy organizations out there, special education attorneys. If you need assistance understanding your rights or navigating, the process, which again could be tedious. I know from firsthand experience, I have a child with a disability and I had to navigate this process by myself. So I always tell people I had to become me because I couldn't afford someone like me. So I had to become this advocate. Okay. And just don't stop fighting. And it doesn't have to be a fight, but it is a fight. And I hate to say that. It doesn't have to be contentious, but sometimes it is. But my point is, don't give up. When you give up, that's when they win. If you know something in your heart is correct and you have the data to back it up, don't give up, okay? Now, the right to an independent evaluation is a powerful tool, okay? It is designed to ensure that your child with a disability receives the most appropriate education possible, right? It's a checks and balance, right? We know the school district's not always going to do a good assessment. And so if they don't, you have the right to get an independent opinion. It's just like going to the doctor and you don't necessarily agree with the doctor. So you want a second opinion to make sure that what they said is accurate. And so it's about ensuring fairness and accuracy in the evaluation process. Don't be afraid to exercise this right if you believe it's in your child's best interest, okay? So for more detailed information about IEEs and other parental rights under the IDEA, I encourage you to visit the official IDEA website at www.ed.gov. And you can also, if there's any questions that you have, that you would like to hear about on this podcast in the future, please feel free to send an email to support@mariefajardo.com. That's support at MARIEFAJARDEO.com. And that's all I have for this episode of my Advocacy Playbook. Join me next time as we explore more ways to champion our children's educational success.